Now, he suffered a tremendous amount of assault through vitriol when he was running for president and when he was president, probably more than any president that I can remember, including Richard Nixon, who I think might have run second for having most abuse dumped on him. And whether or not that's deserved is independent. I think in Trump's case, it was over the top in quite a remarkable way. And so I think that probably elicited more of that bullying behavior that might be perhaps a weakness. I've been trying to understand him. And the bullying, the last interview you did with him, I believe, one of the things I noted about Trump was that he would do something about every 10 minutes that was markedly out of the ordinary conversationally. And so I watch for that because I'm a clinician. And so I always watch people talk to see when they're going off script, let's say, because there's always something underneath that. And one of the things Trump does, and I don't know how much of this is conscious and how much of it is reactive and how much of it has become habitual, is he'll say utterly proper, he'll make statements that are way over the top. So I think he said, for example, when you were interviewing, something like, "I tell the truth more than anyone ever has in history." And then he said about 10 minutes later, something like, "I've run the best administration in American history." And they're over the top, preposterous statements, and they have this self-aggrandizing element that's got a juvenile flavor to it. And I'm not doing a global critique of Trump's personality because I suspect, as you've already indicated, that he's a multifaceted person. But there's an element of him he's got this 10-year-old bully part of him that also has a compensatory element. And so to say, I tell the truth more than anyone has in history or something along those lines, I think, well, like, who are you comparing yourself here to exactly? Like, you tell the truth more than Jesus Christ. You run a better administration than Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. And it's marked because people don't generally do that in conversation, right? They don't come out with a preposterous statement about how remarkable they are with some degree of regularity. And now it seems to me to be associated with some other tendencies that he has. Like, he has a tendency to nickname people, and he has unerring accuracy in doing that, and it can be devastating. And that also reminds me of someone who's like a very professional 11-year-old bully. And a few of them can bring a teacher to their knees if their attacks are targeted. And they can certainly do that with their classmates. And so I wonder with Trump if he's pushed into a corner because of all the vitriol. The bullying and braggadocio tendency has become exaggerated. Maybe he's more surrounded by sycophants now than might be helpful. Now, I don't know that for sure, but it looks to me like something like that is happening. And he's trying to calibrate himself, even during your interview, because he comes out with these statements, something like, "Well, look at how wonderful I am." And I think, well, maybe if he would have got credit for some of the things that he did that were actually pretty positive, like not having America dragged into a war and like also fostering the Abraham Accords, that he wouldn't be so inclined to be compensatory in that manner. And then that bullying tendency seems to me the inverse of that is this victimization routine, which he's wandered into. Now, Trump claims the elections were stolen by corruption. And I would say part of the reason people find that credible is because the American left-wing establishment and the liberal establishment, for that matter, were unbelievably vitriolic to Trump and stooped pretty much to anything in order to devalue and criticize him, no matter how unfair and how over the top. And that generated a fair bit of sympathy on people's part. And I think it generated a sense that he was, in some global sense, treated unfairly. But I can't see that there's any legal evidence that's been compelling that he's been able to bring forth that the elections were legally conducted in an improper and corrupt manner. And so then what I see happening with Trump is that he's fallen prey to the very victimization narrative that he purports to stand against. And so he's gone off brand. It's like, well, Mr. Trump, you're the winner. You're the guy who doesn't have things stolen from him by callow fools. You're the leader of the free country. You can stand up to the dictator of North Korea and to Vladimir Putin himself. You're a winner. And that's your brand. And yet the election was stolen from you. And now your story is it was stolen and everything's corrupt and all the institutions are corrupt, which is exactly what the left-wing radicals are saying. And there's very little positive messaging tied up in that, and it's hamstringing the Republicans. And so, well, that's how it looks to me. And so I'm wondering, you know Trump very well. Am I not giving the devil his due in this situation? Am I off in my analysis in some important way?
No, I think you're spot on. And I think some interesting points you raised there. I mean, I've always thought Trump is a unique character in that he has the thickest skin of anybody I've ever seen in public life, and also the thinnest skin. So he'll react with ridiculous oversensitivity to every slight and come out punching, but he's able to withstand the kind of pressure or scandal that would engulf and destroy every other politician I've ever encountered. So he's a unique hybrid of thick and thick skin. I think that his book is very educational, The Art of the Deal. It's a really entertaining read, and actually has a lot of good business stuff in it. So I recommend people, if you just want to read it, it's quite fun. Remember, he's a real estate tycoon in Manhattan. His whole persona for 50 years before he became president was to show off, embellish, and exaggerate everything. Every one of his buildings, you can imagine the pitch. This is going to be the greatest building New York's ever seen. That was in his DNA. So it's perfectly normal for me that he would take those kind of natural traits to the presidency and continue to be self-aggrandizing in the way he was about his buildings. He'd done it for 50 years. That's how he squeezed big prices for his buildings. Everything was the best and the greatest ever seen.
Yeah, well, that's part of that American salesman routine, right? I mean, that's deeply embedded in the American DNA.
Right, he's not the only New York real estate tycoon who's like that. Trust me, I've met a few. But I also think that he also in the book says if somebody punches you, punch them 10 times harder. Right, that was in his DNA too. Trump has come from a rough old school of New York business people, where the ones who survive and thrive are the ones who, if they get hit, metaphorically or perhaps even physically, they hit back 10 times and harder. That's always been Trump's way. So if you insult him, he'll come for you hard. And if you can survive that, well, good. But many people, including all the candidates in 2016 on the Republican side, they couldn't withstand the nicknames. I mean, the nickname thing was fascinating. To watch him call Marco Rubio Little Marco, and you suddenly thought, wow, he is quite little, isn't he? Low energy Jeb, about Jeb Bush. But Bush couldn't work out whether to carry on being himself and potentially radiate low energy, or what he ended up doing, which was being sort of like a hyper bunny, going way too far the other way to contradict the rumors of being low energy, and he looked completely insane. So Trump was able, and lying Ted about Ted Cruz, crooked Hillary, simple tags they found very hard to struggle.
Yeah, he was very good at that.
He's a brilliant marketer. Mm-hmm. He knows how to sell things. He knows how to market things, and he knows how to do it in a very damaging way to opponents. And he is look, he always said to me, people want me to change, because I said, why don't you dial down the Twitter rhetoric a little bit? Just try to be a little bit more appealing to middle America, to the independents perhaps who are not like diehard MAGA fans. And he said, why should I dial down anything? I've become the president of the United States, despite being the most underqualified candidate in history. Why should I change? I've just beaten, he said, the most qualified candidate the country's ever seen, Hillary Clinton. I kept being told I was the least qualified, she was the most qualified, and I've beaten her to the White House. Why should I change who I am?